Welcome back to the Israel Guys in the Land of Israel Network, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Jeremy Gimpel, Rabbis Jeremy Gimpel, Ari Abramovich, welcome to the show. And our special guest this week, we're super honored to have Chuck Holton, the acclaimed war correspondent. I mean, look at the place that we're living in this day. It's great and an honor to have a war correspondent on the show today in place of Luke. Luke's not able to make it. Everybody understands that. Chuck, it's awesome to have you on here.
Very glad to be here.
As seen on most news networks across the news spectrum, you've been there a lot on CBN and Newsmax. You're often seen, but including your YouTube, The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton.
That's right.
You can find a lot of Chuck's info on there. Real quick, before we dive into the show, we have a new film, guys, coming out on Judea and Samaria. You don't want to miss it next week. It's cutting edge from a Knesset member themselves. Ohad Tal said it was the best. We previewed it with him. He said this is the best film on Judea and Samaria he's ever seen. So that's coming out next week. So be ready to see that. Guys, so much is happening. I guess the breaking news of today is the Shalom Hamas. Chuck, what do you think about that? And then we'll get to the rabbis here in a minute. But Chuck, what do you think about this Shalom Hamas from Donald Trump text?
So President Trump came out on Truth Social and made a post, a fairly lengthy post, that started with Shalom Hamas and then explained that Shalom can mean hello or goodbye. Take your pick. And I thought that was pretty clever.
Right.
And went on to make very clear that Hamas must release all hostages, including the bodies of the hostages. I don't know if you want to just read the whole thing.
And he continues off where you said, he says, only sick and twisted people keep bodies, right? Mm-hmm. And you are sick and twisted. I'm sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. I have just met with your former hostages whose lives you have destroyed. This is your last warning. For the leadership, now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance. Also, to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision, release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later. President Donald J. Trump.
So then the mainstream media, of course, the headlines are Donald Trump threatens genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza.
Was that like local news in America going out? What was that, CNN?
No, it's all over. There's several different ones that I've seen that have had variations of that headline. That's the headline for this whole thing, is that Donald Trump is threatening genocide against Palestinians. Well, you know what? If they are holding hostages, they're not innocent.
Right.
And, Israel is, if they're trying to genocide the Palestinians, they're really, really bad at genocide. Like they just need
their population has increased.
Yes, the population has grown.
No, but I want to point out something. Since the days of the Bible, all of our enemies, there's always been someone that's been good among them. The daughter of Pharaoh. Mm-hmm. There's been Rahab, who was in Jericho. Mm-hmm. There's always been, even among Amalek, there were those that were chose to be righteous. There hasn't even been one Gazan that's given any intel on any of the hostages.
There's a $5 million reward out for the release of
one.
But Trump says it there also. He says to the people of Gaza, I'm constantly hearing this people of Gaza, the innocents of Gaza, the civilians of Gaza. No. I don't see it. 70% of the kidnappings and the murder and the pillagings and the torture and the rape was civilians. Let's not forget, Hamas was democratically elected. Mm-hmm. They got 74 out of 132 seats, and their platform was genocide, the destruction, and that was their platform.
Right.
And they were elected overwhelmingly. So who are these innocent civilians?
Well, this is why they can't have nice things, because when your entire worldview is predicated on who you hate. See, Israel is fighting in Gaza for the people that they love. It's not that they hate the Palestinians as much as they love their own families.
Right.
And so they're protecting the people that they love. And to do that, they have to employ righteous violence against the evildoer.
I just have to say this because I'm the guy that says crazy stuff on the show, but I feel like it's always true. King David, I always wondered how he could compose the Psalms of Israel and with such spiritual nuanced sensitivity and still come back with thousands of Philistines that he slayed that day. And I used to think, well, it's because he loved the nation of Israel and he didn't hate them, because you can't write the Psalms with hate in your heart, right? So he loved his people. But I think on some level, knowing what we know about the world, that we're just fleetingly passing through ephemerally this world, and this body is a garment that we're wearing, and that's it. The greatest act of kindness you can do for them is to kill them and prevent them from murdering Jewish babies and torturing, and it's a kindness for them.
That's right. There's no question. I've made that case many times, that sometimes righteous violence is the most loving thing you can do. If I'm in Afghanistan as a soldier, I've been to Afghanistan a dozen times, and if I'm there and I'm supposed to be guarding a marketplace and there are women and children there and the guy comes running in with a vest on, well, you're not going to reason with that guy. So what's the most loving thing I can do for the people in the marketplace? Shoot him in the face. What's the most loving thing I can do for that guy? Because in seconds, one way or the other, he's going to be standing before the Most High God, giving an answer for his sins. If I save him from committing those heinous crimes, I'm doing him a favor.
And not only that, since he's a child, all he's ever asked for is to be a shaheed, to be a martyr. You're giving that to him. That's a kind thing.
What do you think?
Sending him off to the 72 Virginians.
Right.
As an American, I've heard that joke. Okay. And it's interesting you just said that, because Ari, in your military experience, you were in the sniper, right? So you had sharpshooter. So you had a lot of you had to work through that, and I heard you came to the same conclusion, because I literally heard those words out of your mouth.
Yeah, it's so exciting for me to hear that from you, because it really shows that, like, when there's a biblical orientation and a God orientation, it really can set you straight into to thinking clearly.
Right.
Because I don't want to ever walk around with hate for anyone. Of course. It's corrosive for the person that has the hate in their heart. Of course. And so it's important to reorient it for love. Because what is my dream? Their prayer is to murder all of us. My prayer is for God to open their eyes, for them to say, we're Isaac, Ishmael, we're brothers, we're family, we love each other. What have we done? Let's go worship the God of Israel together at the temple in Jerusalem. It's peace, humanity, for all of humanity. It's not a desire for blood or murder. And that's a fundamental difference.
Right. That's why C.S. Lewis said that all killing is not murder, just like all sex is not adultery. And I think that's a really important thing for a lot of American Christians, especially because we've been raised with the Ten Commandments. And if you were raised in a church like I was that read the King James Bible, thou shalt not kill. And people say, well, then how can you be a soldier? And I say, well, because it doesn't actually say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not commit murder.
Right.
And murder is different. That there is righteous violence. There is righteous killing. That's why in Romans 12, it talks about that the soldiers, police, are God's agents of wrath against the evildoer. That God intended for there to be a class of warriors, a class of men who keep the evil people in our societies hiding in their holes.
Well, that's why the mainstream media that says Israel's going to commit genocide, Donald Trump is calling for genocide. What they've done is they've perverted the truth in such a way that the murderer that's coming and the police officer that kills the murderer before it murders children are the same, because they're both violent and they both have guns. Where if you don't have truth, and that's really what this war is all about, is just exposing the truth for what it is.
Hey guys, we'll be right back. But first, our team has created a Passover Haggadah for Christian Zionists, people that want to connect to Israel. The Passover season is coming up, and we've got this just for you to connect to the Exodus from Egypt, the Jewish people coming into the land of Israel and celebrating that redemption that happened throughout the story of Israel, so connected to the time of Passover. We want you to be a part of that. So go to theisraelguys.com and pick up your copy of the Passover Haggadah for Christian Zionists right now.
But there's also an element. I'm so, again, excited to hear what you said, because I just had a group of Christians on my balcony, and I shared this idea. I said, let's say you're a sniper in World War II. You see a German carrying a Nazi carrying Zyklon B. What's the kindest thing you could do for him? He's like, no, spread the gospel and teach him about God. And I was like, well, if Gandhi did the hunger strike against the Nazis and not the British, he would have lasted about 17 seconds, right? You have to understand who your enemy is and the depth of the evil that you're contending with. Right. And you can't do that for everybody. Right.
I'd love to see warriors hashing this out.
Well, this is something that if you're going to be a warrior, and I spent 8 years in the military, 4 as a ranger, and went to combat, and I had to make this okay with myself before I went in, or else if I found myself in a situation where you were called upon to use righteous violence, I would have faltered. Yeah. And so, you're not going to survive unless you.
Can I ask you a question? How has it been for you when you're in the States, or knowing that you love Israel? And how has it been for you watching this war play out? If you were the head of the Israeli military complex, how would you have run this war differently?
Well, I haven't been in the States much. I mostly have been here, actually, since the war broke out. I've spent about 6 months of the war here in Israel. But the only criticism I would have, not the only, but the major criticism I would have is that there's one thing I've learned in 22 years as a war correspondent. It's that these days, in modern war, we learned as soldiers that there's a kinetic battle space, there's a SIGINT battle space, there's the different types of battle spaces that the war goes on in. What we have today is that the primary battle space is the information battle space. Yeah. And what we find, both here, and I spent 6 months in Ukraine as well in that war, is that public perception actually influences the kinetic battle space. So it used to be the other way around. Right. It used to be whatever happened on the battlefield got into the news and went out and influenced public perception. But now it's backwards. Public perception influences that
upstream.
And so when your enemies are better at information more than you are, it doesn't matter how many battles you win on the battlefield. You can still lose the war. And Israel has been, I hate to say this, but so terrible at understanding the fundamentals of how to wage war in the information battle space. And what they'll say is, because I've dealt with the public affairs people at the IDF a lot, and I'll be like, I have 20 plus years of combat experience. I know what I can film and what I can't. I know how not to tell bad people things they don't need to know. I'm on your side. Okay, I'm not even hiding that. I support Israel.
You're biased.
So let me embed with you. I have invitations from IDF units to come with them, and the press office says no, you can't go. And they say you don't need to. We put out information every day. You can use the stuff we put out. And I say if it's coming from one of the belligerents, it's automatically suspect in the eyes of the world. And so it's not that I can't. I'm happy to use whatever they put out. And I believe it, but you are doing so much good work in Gaza. You are doing so many things that needed to be done. You are liberating the people of Gaza from their own hatred.
We've killed more people on America's terrorist list than in the last year than they have in the last 30.
No question.
I want to talk more about the what you're talking about. How is winning and how it's shifted now, because it's public opinion, and we know that there's a thing called anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, that really impacts this strongly, and I think it has a lot to do with it. I think even if Israel was to be their top game in this public diplomacy area, there would still be this mass hatred, because you're dealing with things like Instagram, and you're dealing with Facebook, and you're dealing with TikTok.
So much of that is propaganda that is put. And look, Russia is top of the heap when it comes to information warfare. Oh yeah. And Russia, China, Iran, they're all doing it. And you'd be surprised how much anti-Israel propaganda is actually coming out of Russia.
It's unreal.
But right now.
I'm sure. Right.
Okay. Yeah. And so many American conservatives in the United States
are believing it.
Have been totally influenced by Russian propaganda on not just this war, but the war in Ukraine as well.
But just to gently push back, I think part of our problem with Hasbara, with advocacy, is that we're doing it. is that we're so consumed with trying to make our case to the world as if the world is the judge and we're just the defendant trying to, as opposed to actually acting with moral clarity. And that Hassan Nasrallah funeral with 700,000 people, cluster bomb, napalm, whatever it needs to be, that is all the advocacy we need.
You're not disagreeing with me at all. I agree with you 100% on that. And what I'm saying is that the truth, capital T, the truth will set you free. So when they allow the truth to get out, when they make it easier for journalists to get the truth out, even though there are so many journalists who are just waiting to sandbag Israel, it's still the truth. And they can't eventually, that truth is going to seep out there. It's going to get out there if they are transparent about it. Yeah, we were talking before the show about kind of the history of Israel and sort of the communist roots of it started out as kind of a commune, and how that has affected the leftist politics inside Israel as it has in the United States. And whenever you have what I've seen this throughout my career, whenever you have a leftist government in the United States, there's no transparency. I can't go out with the border patrol. I can't go out with the military. They literally will tell me, we do not want you to tell any stories. I'm like, but you're doing good stuff. Doesn't matter. They will not let you talk. When a right-wing government comes in, when Trump government comes in, the handcuffs come off. I can go in, I can ride along with those guys. I can report everything they're doing. And at the beginning of the war in Afghanistan under President Bush, that's exactly what it was like. They would say, come in, you can become one of our, look, you actually get a set of orders as if you're a soldier.
Everybody can know
what's going on. And you go along. Now, if you say something that puts us at risk, you're out of here. Right. There are some ground rules, but we're not going to tell you how to do your job. You just come in and you tell the truth. That's all we ask. Right. And the world's understanding, the world's opinion about the war at the beginning in the global war on terror was very positive toward the United States because of that. But Israel just doesn't, they don't want any of that.
Well, that's a shift that's actually taking place here. We're moving from a more left government to a more right wing, and it's becoming the norm in the nation of Israel. So I think you're going to see the same results of what you're saying. So
I have to report the truth in Israel in spite of the public affairs, not with the help of the public.
And I would be very interested to hear if your perspective aligns with mine, because when I'm going to the front lines and meeting the soldiers, I've never seen such a discrepancy, such a power. What's the word for power in English?
A gap.
A gap between the nation and the leadership. We talk about this every week. I talk about this, but it's just...
And that really represents what you're saying as well.
That's what you're saying. And I see the soldiers and they're taking off their old patches of their old army units and they're putting on the temple. The temple. They're fighting for redemption. Now, people can say that's scary and that's theological, but this is a religious war. That's exactly we're being disabused of our illusions, and our idols are being shattered in front of our eyes. Since October 7th, we had the idol of our technological superiority. Look at and a bunch of guys on hang gliders were able to wreak havoc and bring us to our knees. That's happening on a lot of different fronts. And just this last week, we saw Israeli Arabs are committing terrorist attacks. And people are like, but they're Israeli Arabs. How could they? Aren't they patriotic? Aren't they loyal? They need to say that because they want to believe that this is a political conflict and it's a political battle and it's a religious war. That's what it really is.
So when you're saying you see on the front lines the lower echelon of enlisted troops, non-commissioned officers, those guys are probably much more right-leaning than the leadership, which is much more left-leaning.
Yeah, Israel's the only country in the world, and I hope the statistic is right because I'm nearly positive it is. The last elections, if only under the age of 25 could have voted, then Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the furthest right-wing religious, would have been prime minister. Meaning every other, you look at America and like the younger demographics are being brainwashed in their universities and they're becoming left, and global TikTok and the Chinese, and it's just brainwashing an entire generation. But here in Israel, It's going the opposite direction.
You can't, because you can't ignore the things that are threatening your country. In the United States, they've made it very easy for us to ignore the threats to our livelihood, to our
But there's something deeper, I think, that's happening here in Israel. That's not just about that. God says that when he returns us to the land, the desert will blossom and the trees will give forth their fruit, that he will take from us a heart of stone and put within us a heart of flesh, that will have a circumcision of the heart. And when you raise children on this land, breathing the air of Israel and walking on the soil of Judea, it makes them into Judean warriors. It's doing something in our hearts that I think is going to ripple to all of humanity.
No doubt. I want to talk more about Trump's statements. Jeremy, what do you think led to that? Do you think that the hostages showing up at the White House had anything to do? I mean, it seems like it had to have something to do with Trump releasing this pretty harsh statements on Hamas.
Yeah, I'll tell you, King Solomon says that the heart of kings is in the hands of God. And for the first time, an American president had an encounter with these survivors, these hostages in the Oval Office. And if you watch the clip, it brings tear to your eyes. Check it out.
Let's watch it here.
Were you all taken on October 6th? Yes. So this was hell, huh?
It was the worst thing that anybody can go through.
It's a miracle.
That you're living?
Yes.
My family and I myself, we believe we've been sent by God to release them.
We think they could get out thanks to you.
Yes.
We are here because of you.
We're alive, the free people, because of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That's unbelievable. What a story. I've never had anything like this. I mean, I've saved a lot of people, but I've never seen anything like this where you lived under those conditions. Horrible stories. Not even believable.
Thank you.
We'll get them out. Watch.
So, it's heartbreaking, and Trump is looking at that, and he has clear righteous indignation and moral clarity. You can sense it, that's what this is about. This isn't a pragmatic thing, but it's not just the hostages, it's their families. Just yesterday, Vladislav Bongart, he took his own life. His daughter, Sophia, was killed by Hamas terrorists during the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. And he visited every week her grave. He left red roses, and he just, the pain overtook him, and he just took his own life. And this is happening. We're a shattered, PTSD, grieving, traumatized nation. And to see Donald Trump see that and feel righteous indignation about it, it's just...
And the very next day, he puts out a message saying, all of you are going to die. I am going to put an end to this evil. That's something that can't be explained other than the hearts of kings are in the hands of God. He released $2 billion in MK 84 bombs, and each one of those bombs can destroy an entire building. $295 million in D9s and tractors. I mean, we're about to unleash something on Gaza the world has never seen, and it's coming from such a place of truth that you can't say, oh, he's talking genocide, he's saying left, he's saying right. It's like, no, this is evil, and we need to put an end to evil.
Hey guys, we'll be right back. But first, guys, the Israel Summit is coming up in Dallas, June 9th through the 11th, and that's a must. If you're a Christian Zionist out there and you want to bring support to Israel but can't make it all the way to Israel, you need to meet Israelis in Dallas. They're coming to America, and that's where you need to meet them. It's one of the best ways to get to know Israel, the Jewish nation, especially right now in this time, sensitive time, amazing time to get better connected to Israel. Guys, the 25% off the tickets only last until next week, and so get on there right now. Go purchase your tickets and join us in Dallas. I'll be there along with David Friedman, and we've just confirmed just now former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann as well. The list is growing, and we've got some really amazing top-line speakers from Israel and also supporters, amazing political supporters in America. Join us June 9th through the 11th in Dallas for the annual Israel Summit, June 9th through the 11th. See you there.
But Chuck, I want to ask you, you mentioned before the show, and I want to sort of get into that. You said that because to me, to my eyes, it seems like Trump is broadcasting moral clarity, righteous indignation, and strength. And you said
peace through strength. That's their whole.
But you said the opposite.
I just said it is only going to be perceived to be coming from a position of strength if he follows through.
Like with my 5-year-old.
No, but it doesn't. He doesn't need to follow through. You know who needs to follow through?
Well,
Israel needs to follow through. And let me tell you the answer. What would victory look like? Meaning, you said to bomb Nasrallah's funeral and kill the 70,000.
That's not victory. It's a gesture.
That's not victory. Victory in Hebrew is netzach, and that word literally means eternal. It means forever. A victory that is forever. That's real victory. And what does that look like? It's two S's: sovereignty and settlement.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just destroy the darkness. We have to bring the light. If we rebuild Gaza, if we bring Jews back to Gaza, we invite those who love the world into Gaza to rebuild, and we settle it, that is real victory, because that's eternal. It's not enough to just wipe them out. We have to rebuild. And then it doesn't matter really what we say, because our saying is in our doing. And if we bring actual victory by declaring sovereignty and resettling Gaza, that will be
what
the
you said
ultimate
to Chuck,
victory.
I think, really nailed it, because the fact is that sovereignty, Israel is constantly going and making our appeals to Trump, please let us have sovereignty. Say, well, you can have, it's not sovereignty. It's only sovereignty if we don't need anyone's blessing or approval. If we just say we're declaring sovereignty because that's what already is. Jews don't need to declare sovereignty over Judea. It is just what is the truth of the world, and we just say it and do it because it begins here in our own heads, in our own eyes.
I'll tell you a new understanding.
It's got to be followed up on. That's all I'm saying. It's got to, like you say, we've got 35,000 Mark 84 2,000-pound bombs. The blast radius on those things is 400 yards. That's 4 football fields. Okay,
Wow.
So of one. So
I think he's trying to say something.
yeah. So I mean, if all hell's going to break out, I mean, and I've been making this case for a long time. Until Israel has a leadership that has the strength of conviction to make the hardest choice, and that hardest choice is to say, Hamas, you've got 24 hours to release all of our hostages. And if you don't bother.
Yeah.
Don't bother, because we're done talking about it. We're done negotiating. We're done trading hundreds of terrorists for one of our people. We understand that whoever you have left is probably not going to survive. We're going to try to rescue them if we can, but they're probably not going to survive. But we will not stop until all of you are gone.
You know,
there's also a precedent in the Bible when there is an
is.
evil society like Sodom and Gomorrah. It was pretty much like delete. In the fact that there hasn't been even one Gazan that's given us any intel is a sign that there's not even
this
one
past
Gaza.
week, there was a Druze terrorist that really attacked on a bus, murdered Jews, and the entire Druze community came out and said, he is not us.
That's right.
He's actually citing, we're not going to bury him in a respectful way. It's like, oh, that is what loyal residents and citizens of a country look like.
That's the right way.
Never do you hear anything like that. But I wanted to say about Trump that I think it's not just righteous indignation. He's America first. And I think that's great. And he understands that there's a difference between Russia and Ukraine and what Israel is facing. That this is about the global jihad that has their eyes on America. And he understands that it's better for America to fight the jihad here in Israel than to wait and let it come into America, which it's already doing.
Would he go so far as to, even like if I was President Trump, I think he's saying exactly the right things. If I was President Trump, I would make a point of when hell is unleashed.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be Israel. It's going to be American F-35s. It's going to be American B-52s. We've got 2 squadrons of B-52s in the region now. And maybe go ahead, you guys go ahead and you take care of what's going on in Gaza. Meanwhile, while you're busy with that, we're going to create an even bigger parking lot out of the parking lot that is Yemen. We're going to.
I thought you were going to say Iran.
I was going to say we're going to make Yemen look like Gaza, but that would be an improvement for Yemen, actually. So
It's pretty down.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, Chuck, I want to tell you that I think that if this is a chess game, Yemen is maybe a bishop, Gazan are the pawns, the king, the checkmate is Iran.
Exactly.
And that's really what we're all waiting
Well, it
for.
depends on how far you go up, right? Because there's a larger axis at play as well. I mean, beyond Iran, right? I mean, really, you have a much larger. Where does North Korea? Where does Russia? Where does China fit into that?
Well, let me point out though, if Israel wants to really have eternal victory, in terms of Iran, the United States has to do it, because Israel does not have. Okay, so just give you an example. The United States, the largest bomb that we have created that's non-nuclear,
Moab,
is called that's a nickname, but the Moab is a fuel air explosive. It's a different thing. This is called the Mobile Ordnance Penetrator, the MOP. It's a 20-foot long bomb that's about 32 inches around. It's got more than 2,000 kilograms of very high yield explosive, and it can penetrate 200 feet of earth or 65 feet of hardened reinforced concrete before it explodes. It was designed specifically to take out the Fodor base in Iran and some of the others that they've buried under mountains. The problem is it's 30,000 pounds. You don't have any aircraft that can lift that thing. It would have to be dropped by an American B-52 or B-1, B-2 bomber. Okay. And so there's no F-35, there's no F-16 in the world that can drop that thing. And so if and when we're going to make a real strike against the nuclear capability in Iran, it has to include American aircraft.
Well, I'll tell you how that conversation would look. Trump saying, Bibi, I'm doing this. And Bibi's like, wait, let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Let's sit a meeting about it, have a committee about it. And that's the way it's looking.
Which leads to a question I have for you. I posed this to my viewers on the Hot Zone the other day. Do you consider Netanyahu to be more leftist or more to the right as far as...
Can I say it?
You go ahead, I'll go next. Yeah.
He is a sheep in wolf's clothing. He looks like he's on the right. He looks like he's a wolf. He looks like he's right wing. But in his heart, I mean, the siege on Gaza now, we've stopped the humanitarian aid. That was Bibi's decision. What about stopping their water, stopping their fuel, stopping the electricity, putting an end to it, and in 3 days, they're already raising the white flag?
That's right. It'd be over in 3 days.
Exactly.
I would even say he's a pragmatist. He puts his finger to the wind and he sees where the poles are going. And I've said this before on the show, but it's an important message to give, is he is the Saul of our generation. And what did Samuel said to Saul? Go in, and Amalek, they're a force of evil in the world. Men, women, children, babies, they are evil. Wipe them out. Don't spare any of them. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't bring himself to do it. Yeah. And Benjamin Netanyahu from the tribe of Benjamin, Saul is from the tribe of Benjamin. That's who we're dealing with right now.
They didn't even have the UN back then.
That's right.
So pushing it.
Go ahead.
President Donald Trump has brought a new understanding to biblical prophecy. And the most famous verse in the Talmud that's brought from the book of Isaiah is God will bring a redemption, be'ita achishena, which means in its time, I will hasten it. And the Jews are like, in its time, I will hasten it. Well, is there a fixed time or is God going to hasten it? And there's a whole discussion about what that means. And if we merit it, it'll come earlier. If we don't, there's a fixed time. But achishena doesn't just mean I will hasten it. It also means I will push you. And what Donald Trump right now is doing is he is pushing us, giving us the bombs, giving us the green light, saying everything we should be saying. And in some ways, he's doing exactly what a righteous leader should be doing, pushing us in the direction of victory.
We've had Knesset members thrown out of the Knesset for saying things that are more mild than Donald Trump has said. He's totally not only changed the Overton window, he shattered the window and built a new window.
Built a new one.
Right?
Yeah. Guys, we're talking a lot about around this picture of what's going on in Iran and what could be upon us. We talked yesterday when you came out to visit, and it's like we're in the middle of World War III right now already. World War II, the wars weren't named World War II when it was happening. It was named after the fact. We're in the middle of it, folks. And that was like, whoa, you're right. You really think that?
We're in it.
I do think that. Yeah.
Right,
I mean, you just when you look at all of the nations who are directly or indirectly involved in wars, in wars that are going on right now in the world, it's a world war, and all of them are connected. Right. The reason the Russians are essentially supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and those guys in this war is that any war that distracts the West from the war in Ukraine makes it more likely that Russia will win the war in Ukraine. That's why they're pushing Venezuela to attack Guyana. They're trying to foment unrest around the world. They're doing it in our countries through cyber warfare. Yeah. They're doing it outside our countries through their geopolitical stuff. They're doing it in Armenia. They're doing it everywhere. And so that's why I think, in World War II, it looked different because everybody didn't have a nuke. But if everybody has a nuke, or almost everybody, those nuclear armed powers cannot fight each other. They just can't. That's because a nuke is a deterrent to those two nations going to war.
Only if you're deterred.
Exactly.
That's
only
right.
if you're deterred to die. But what if your dream is to be a shaheed? What if you want death? What if you are dreaming about the more death, the more the worship? And it could be that Iran is really just waiting to push
Very much.
Yeah, they've just mobilized their forces and they're ready to pounce
What are their
So let's
forces?
talk
It's
about that.
12 other militias that they've directed. This is not just the Houthis in Yemen. It's them and 12 other. I don't know who all the 12
They're
is. I
trying to
assume that's
rebuild
there.
militias in the Hashishabi in Iraq and Syria. They're
Yep.
trying to rebuild those.
Yep.
They're working with Sudan.
Right.
They're working with Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So they're trying to garner more.
Where are they getting the support to feel like that's going to be successful?
already. Do you think that they already have nukes?
I don't think they have the delivery system. Obviously, if they tested one, we would know it. So their test is going to be over Tel Aviv if they can deliver it. There's two components to that. You have the actual, can you create a fission, right? And yes, they have the ability, I think, to do that.
Because a few months ago, there was pretty definitive evidence
probably
that they
get
did an underground nuke test underground in that region. At least that's what all the.
There was a rumor for sure.
But what I would
haven't
say is
seen it.
it's just important to understand historically where we're at.
Yeah.
We're right now in the month of Adar. Next week is the holiday of Purim. There's a lot of books that didn't make its way into the Bible. The book of Maccabees, right? It's a true story. It's not in the Bible. Why is for a book to be in the Bible, it needs to be prophetically relevant for the future, not just historically relevant. And that's the reason the book of Esther is in, because just as there was a king in Persia, Haman, a man that wanted to wipe out the entire nation of Israel, genocide. In Persia then, in the future, it will play out exactly that way. In Iran, there's going to be a leadership that is going to seek to wipe out the entire nation of Israel. And that's exactly what we're facing now. And what ended up happening? Haman built the gallows that he himself was hung on.
Yeah.
I wonder, there's so much to that story that God chose to use a weak Jewish woman to save the nation of Israel. He didn't use a big, strong warrior leader. He chose, he works that way. And it makes me wonder, obviously, like you said, God turns the hearts of kings, and President Trump is a very bombastic figure, very, in your face and everything. Just makes me wonder what God is really doing with this, because obviously he's working all this together.
Well, I mean, look at us. Well, look what we got around us. Iran is asking for 12 other militias to join. They're asking for simultaneous drone attacks, missile attacks, terrorist attacks, all at the same time, right? And who knows if it's going to be scaled up to be a larger attack or not.
But do you think these militias are really, they want?
That's what I was going to ask you, is like, what are they thinking that this is going to do? They're like a bunch of barefoot people running around saying jihad and whatever, but at the same
It's
time,
the videos of the Hezbollah leadership. No, he's the next up. He's
right, he's the one, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Houthis are, they're a sideshow. They're a clown show. It's like watching a goat rodeo down there. Those guys, they make music videos after they steal it.
Yeah, but Biden let them take themselves seriously. So they have a very inflated self-perception that
you
Trump
have
can.
this. You have this malicious style that Iran is trying to engage. But on top of that, just 2 days ago, there was the Arab Summit that was held in Cairo. We have so many tanks lined up on the Gaza border. The Arab world is not quiet right now, and there are a bunch of jihadis hell-bent on destroying the nation of Israel. And I think the West is a little bit. There's been a few Knesset members. The new ambassador to America just mentioned this as well. Hey, this is actually concerning. This is not just, we should recognize that there's a few different layers going on here. Egypt is not our friend. They're defying the peace treaties. So you get these local, and Egypt is no militia. They're massive, massive military.
Egypt facilitated October 7th. Without them constantly,
no doubt about it. Okay, so what I want to, do you have something on that, Jeremy?
I think that a stage is being set that we will be up against impossible odds.
Yeah.
That there'll be
even if
militias
America's
all around
with us.
Even if America's with us on the other side of the world, we are 6 million Jews surrounded by a half a billion Muslims that want to throw us in the sea. The Arab Summit that was held in Egypt, the fact that it was held in Egypt when Egypt didn't allow any of the Gazan Gazans to escape.
No.
It's not like they have the Gazans' best interests in mind.
They don't care.
They don't have Israel. They don't care at all. All they care about is Egypt. And what they would love to do is perpetuate this conflict and keep Israel weak.
Right.
And so thank God Trump has been like, we're rejecting that Egypt plan. But right now, the stage is being set quite literally of impossible odds, because then who's going to get the credit?
Yeah.
Definitely not the IDF and definitely not President Trump. It's going to be impossible odds where
for
God's
anyone.
glory is revealed.
Yeah, there is a reason.
So many times in your history.
There's a reason that
Exactly.
BB is so pragmatic and that Trump can be so boisterous, because in the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to be left handling that. And I think there's a decent chance that America may stand down.
You have to live here.
Right. We have to live here. And ultimately, I believe we are going to be all alone in this final showdown.
Yeah, I've often wondered why don't we just put an American military base on the, down here in the Jordan River Valley someplace, and just because that is exactly what we've done in Korea. We have 12,000 troops in South Korea. They don't do anything. They sit there. They're there as a deterrent to North Korea, to keep them from attacking. We had troops in northern Syria.
That's what Trump wanted to do with Zelensky in Ukraine. He said, let us put a business in there and we'll mine your stuff, and then they're not going to attack.
He totally fooled that one right over.
We should talk. There's a few more things to talk about. One is we should discuss Zelensky a little bit. I think that's it. We should discuss that because that's
was a good segue
that's
then.
going on here.
Yeah.
But we need to get to that. But also we need to talk about with the Arab Summit. The Arabs produced a $53 billion plan to rebuild Gaza, and Trump said, "No, thank you. We don't want that."
Well, the Arab world has endless amounts of funds to rebuild the Gaza Strip. It's not going to be zillions of dollars. All right, $53 billion. We'll rebuild some homes. It is very achievable. That's why victory isn't just destroying Gaza and turning it into a parking lot.
No.
D9s are not the answer. Only when we declare sovereignty and we settle the land, because Gaza is a part of the land of Israel that was promised to God by
Right.
God to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's why the battleground of this evil force that attacked us on the Sabbath, that attacked us on the holiday we're celebrating the Torah, the Peace, Love, and Music Festival. It's manifest evil. And where is the battleground between good and evil? It's in the land of Israel. God's only promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is this land.
And that's why we're the only ones to blame, right? If we understand that it's up to us to declare sovereignty and to settle it, and we don't, we're leaving a vacuum. And that vacuum is going to be filled by an Arab summit where they start to, or America coming in, we're going to do this, and all of these different ideas, when really it's about us. This is about us waking up and taking responsibility.
I'll tell you something else. It's not just about us, though. I'll tell you who it's about. It's about Chuck. And I'll tell you why. It really is.
I was just thinking that.
It's an honor to meet you, my friend. But what I feel like Israel's going through such hard times now. And many of the Jews are leaving Israel. There's a huge wave. Tens of thousands of Jews are like, listen, this country is enough. And the only people that are staying here are the people that are believers.
Yeah.
Believers enough to stay in, believers in this land, believers in this nation, believers in the future of Israel. Because if you're just a secular dude, nice life in Florida.
Why not? Yeah.
But what's happening is it's a sifting process.
Yeah.
Malachi says there'll be a refining fire that just like it purifies the gold and it brings out all, but that's happening all around the world. And what's happened? We have people like Chuck that have joined the team now.
Yeah.
People like the Wallers that have joined the team now. And this refining fire is creating pure gold that will be connected to Israel. And that's a part of the process as well. The hard times and the impossible odds are there in order to purify us, to bring all of us together for this great day.
That's why when you talked about Esther, I had a thought, not that you're Esther, we're not into that whole thing, but ultimately, what did Mordecai say to Esther? She said, my life, I could be forfeiting my life to do this. And he said, salvation will come to the nation of Israel, but will it be through you? And I meet guys like you that are here, and you're like, I want to be a part of blessing Israel. I want to be a part of the salvation of Israel.
Look, I've been a war correspondent for so long, and there was a time when I got really depressed and burned out because my whole job is to see mayhem and death. And after 10 years of that, I was in Congo, and I just was overwhelmed by the scale of the suffering and the need there. And there's a refugee camp with 100,000 people in it. 80% of them were under the age of 12. Because all their parents had died of AIDS. And every morning there was a little pile of bodies out in front of the gate of that thing. And there's another 100,000 of them waiting to get into that camp, even though that was where they were all dying. And I was like, I can't fix this, God. I can't fix it. Why am I doing this? I mean, and if I give my last remaining power bar to this kid, the other ones are going to rip his arms off to get it. If I try to adopt one of them, what difference does it make? There's so many. And God said, your job is to tell the story. And if you tell the story, then the world can do something about it.
Yeah.
And so I've come to realize that being a purveyor of the truth is a very noble calling. And when I have to see that death and mayhem and destruction and spend my life around people who are having their worst day, I can feel like I am contributing something here.
Right.
I'm not just an impartial observer. And since that day, I've never pretended to be. I used to think that being a journalist meant that you stand back and you just let people die and let whatever happens. But now if I have a chance to help somebody that's dying, I think that I've come to the understanding that I have to approach this job from the moral component first, and then the journalistic component second. And so if I have to put my camera down and pick somebody up and carry them to safety, or if I have to drag a wounded guy off the battlefield, or if I have to help a small child or whatever, then I'm no longer a journalist. I'm a humanitarian for that moment. And that's okay.
I think there's two types of journalists. There's honest ones and dishonest ones. The dishonest ones say that they're unbiased.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And the honest ones are just admit it. Like that's, we all have.
My soul can't afford to be unbiased.
Right.
When you see evil,
right,
you have to call it what it is.
Well, I think we're seeing some massive moves that we've discussed today in moving this in the right direction. Gaza, we're seeing moving. Who knows what's going to happen here? But we're at the verge of something, and we're probably within days of it. That's what I would. Are we into some predictions here? Trump laid down a pretty solid. That sounded like days to me.
Well, but
I don't know.
Again, he's making this claim, but Israel's going to have to back it up.
Yeah, and that's what happened last time.
So
Israel rejected it. Trump already tried to do this once, and Israel was like, just bring the ones that you said. Don't bring them all out. Well, Trump's now doing the same thing again, saying, no, I think at this point, we're at a point where we're saying,
do you remember the boondoggle of a port that Biden brought in, the floating dock off of Gaza?
Unreal.
We all know, looking back, that was a political stunt.
Yeah.
It was theater.
They didn't even use it. Yeah.
So that's what I'm concerned about with Donald Trump. Is this his version of a political theater to make these grand pronouncements and then be able to say, oh, well, Israel chose not to do this.
Even if it is, he's putting on a good show.
Billions of dollars puts on a good show. Delivered to Israel is more than just.
Yeah, so that may be, look, I gave you the means. There's
how much more could we ask from him? I think he's giving us what we need to do, that if we finally have actually grown and awoken from the defibrillator of October 7th, then we don't need America to hold our, we're not that little codependent vassal state anymore. And that's like a really big part of the, but there's something also that is comforting and strengthening about being outnumbered. Because when you look at Jewish history, we only have our greatest victories when there's no chance we're going to have any victory at all. In West Point Military Academy, where they study wars, they don't study the 6-Day War. They say, here we study wars, not miracles, right? It's only when we have this inflated sense, America's got our back, and we put our faith in all these other places, that's when we're most vulnerable.
Well, so I think humility really takes a big needs to take a big place in this.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was encouraged about listening to the speeches that were given by Herzi Halevi as he was stepping down from the IDF yesterday, and Zamir, as he was taking the chief position, it was the humility that I heard in their statements. Herzi Halevi was saying, whatever happened during my tenure is on me, and we made mistakes, and those mistakes, I own those. Okay, that's humility. I love to see that, because what concerns me is when I see pride in our leadership.
Humility would actually be owning it, not just saying it. Maybe that's a nice gesture of Herzi Halevi, but if he really owned it, he would have stepped down immediately in shame, and he wouldn't have insisted on appointing his, and staying in and having control. If he stepped down in shame, I would agree with that.
Now, one good point that we have coming out with the guy coming in, Jeremy, we spoke about that, he's at the Western Wall. What a great place to start this position.
I'd rather him at the Temple Mount.
Well, I want you to know that the new chief of staff, someone found his note that he he left in the Kotel. And you said that just the soldiers in the field, they're praying for the temple. They have the temple patch. The upper echelons of leadership are not.
Right.
And I'll translate his letter just for the show. You can put it up on the screen if you want to see it. May we build the temple and establish the foundations of the Jewish nation. That's his first sentence in his note in the Kotel. May we believe that we have the strength to defend the land of Israel, the promised land, and all of the nation of Israel.
Wow.
So he's talking about a promised land. Promised by who? He's talking about a temple. He's saying things that no chief of staff in Israel has ever said before. We pray for the return of the hostages and for the peace of the defenders of our nation, the soldiers and the security forces. For the Torah shall go forth from Zion. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir.
You got it.
It's signed. He signed
it. That is his note that he left in the Kotel, feet from where the temple was once stood and hopefully one day will stand. That is a sign of hope for the future of Israel.
No, that's unbelievable. That's our shattering Israeli politics that we just talked about earlier. That moves to a whole new level. Well, more than that, it represents the new generation of Israelis that we were talking about earlier. This is the first time I'm hearing this. So I'm like almost got emotional hearing this because that has been what the younger generation has longed for, is what you see, but has been held back by literally almost like a deep state holdback. It wasn't the whole. That's the reason why it's kind of deep state, because it's not representing the nation. I sure hope that's actually.
I have a war happening in my heart right now between being excited and moved about this and being cynical and skeptical by the traumas that we've experienced where we consistently vote.
No, but he didn't do that further left. He didn't do that to be public. That was meant to be a prayer on the wall, you think?
Find this here, open for news. I'm saying maybe he knows I actually think it's good. I think it's good and it's true, and I'm excited to see him actually step up.
Wow.
And I'm rooting for him and praying for him.
The fact that
I want to see it in action and not just in words.
The fact that he would know even that would be publicized in the first sentences, may we build the temple and may the Torah go forth from Zion.
There's no way that a leftist would be able to say that.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. To me, that's earth-shattering.
We played on this show, right? The Golan, the head of the idea of saying, what? You can't
say this is God's
war. You can't read the Shema. Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord. You can't. You should be thrown out.
Guys, we've only got a few more minutes here. That was an extreme high for me, Jeremy. Thanks for translating that. Yeah, that's unreal. That's Messianic times of Israel. I mean, literally. So. And as you hear it here on the Israel Guys, there's another amazing thing. A senior U.S. official says the Trump administration, and I love how they just say senior official and it leaves us all guessing who said it. I don't know. But this is, so maybe this is just kind of like,
we can guess a lot.
Yeah, we can guess.
Huckabee. Yeah, it can be all of them, actually.
But they didn't want to put their name on it yet. That means it's just kind of like an idea yet. They're kind of floating it out there. And let's just say here on this show, you got a lot of support for this. From our Christian Zionist side, our Jewish side, we like this. The Trump administration is considering allowing Israel to extend sovereignty over Judea and Samaria and is not ruling out applying the Gaza plan there as well. U.S. discussions include proposals to transform parts of the region into a joint American-Israeli project while promoting Palestinian immigration to Sinai and Jordan. That's a really interesting statement.
Well, I also love that statement because it shines light on the Gaza situation, because within Israel, there's a big debate that's happening. Is Trump saying that he wants it to be actually American territory or does he want it to be Israeli territory that America is creating developments on? That's a big deal. And by hearing what he's saying here, he's saying, I want you to have sovereignty.
Right.
And I want to develop it with you.
And I also like the fact that he's promoting immigration of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria. If we're already going to remove the evil from Gaza, why don't we remove the evil from the rest of the land of Israel as well? And with that, I just want to end with like one Torah.
Sure. Before you do that real quick though, can I say,
of course,
what is the Gaza plan that's referenced here? What do they mean? Does anybody know?
Yeah, you talked about Gaza Largo.
I don't know.
What Trump was talking about.
Is that what they're referring to?
Yeah, that's like the Riviera. That's Gaza.
That's the last question.
What did you think?
But I didn't know. I was like, what are we talking about? The parking lot? Are we talking about what stage?
Is the parking lot theory or the casino theory? Like which one are we doing?
Okay, so before you get to the Torah thing,
because that's my house.
Lastly, we didn't talk about Zelensky at all, but I think that was a pretty amazing thing that happened. Or amazing. I don't know what I could say about that. I don't know about. There was definitely a showdown that happened there. There's some fascinating things happening on on the global stage. I think that would lead more to our World War III discussion earlier. I don't think we have time to talk about it on this show. So any short comments on that, if anybody has something really short.
President Zelensky does, he really needs to get a better understanding of how to deal with President Trump. He's getting whiplash. Yeah. Most people that don't live in the United States don't really understand that there are two countries living in the United States, and those two countries are almost mutually exclusive. And so he's been dealing with one country, the Biden country, for 4 years. And then President Trump comes in and he's having to completely realize it's a different country.
The other thing to know about him, for all the conservatives who don't know this, is that he's been very anti-Israel. Very, 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 very anti-Israel. Zelensky. He's not been a partner to Israel.
Ukraine has barely ever, if ever, voted for Israel in any type of international vote at the UN.
Anti-Semitism in Ukraine is outrageous.
Unbelievable.
Never heard.
Some of the
Ukraine
most
is drenched in
outrageous.
Jewish blood.
Drenched. They continue still, from what I hear.
went to
Let me push back on that.
Push back.
Because have you been to Ukraine?
No, I've never
been there.
No,
I've been there. So you can look at me.
You've been there?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This is hearsay from me.
I mean, I lived there for 6 months.
Okay, I'll trust you on this one.
Never experienced
Anti-Israel.
one bit of anti-Semitism, and I've heard
Glad to hear it.
a ton of support for Israel.
You're also, just to be fair, you're not a Jew, so you wouldn't have experienced the anti-Semitism. I'm saying it is in their mother's breast milk. It is so prevalent and so overwhelming. When I was there, the taxi driver...
There's a ton of Jews there. I mean, I've met a lot of Jews.
Okay, well, it's also the Rabbi Nachman's grave is one of the biggest cash cows of the country, right? And so it's in their interest. But when you're, I was in a cab there, and the cab driver, I said, "Who's this on the bill?" He's like, "Khmelnytsky, big hero of Ukraine. Khmelnytsky pogroms slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Jews. A big hero in the Ukraine." I'm just saying that as Jews, we have a collective trauma, and the Ukraine is a
big part of that trauma.
They out-Nazi'd the Nazis.
Right. They weren't like the other countries that said no to that. And
there was an idea of actually taking some of the Gazans, I think 500,000, and moving them to the Ukraine. And I thought that would just be beautiful poetic justice.
Would that be better than Greenland?
I know
Trump.
And by the way, that doesn't mean that they can't redeem themselves.
No,
even if they were that way, and if they were coming out and saying we defend Israel, we stand with Israel, then okay, there's redemption in the world.
This is the thing that frustrates me too, because as I said, I think that we should start with the moral component and say what's right. Let's do what's right, and then worry about whether or not it's politically expedient or economically feasible or anything like that. Let's just start with what's right. And one of the criticisms I've had of Israel is that their relationship with Azerbaijan, for example, has been based on political expediency and the fact that they're also enemies of Iran, and so we would be friends with them. But as in terms of just basic morality, in my opinion, Israel should be standing on the side of Armenia in this, because Armenia, they have so much in common in terms of being surrounded by people who want to kill you, radical Muslims, and they're people of they're a Christian nation, the world's first Christian nation. They were aligned with Russia. They've learned that was a really bad mistake, right? And they were tremendously hurt by by Israeli weapons that were sold to Azerbaijan and then used cluster bombs on civilians in Armenia. And the Armenians are like, what the heck? There was the Armenian genocide that led to, and because the Armenian genocide was ignored by the world, Hitler literally referenced it in justifying the genocide against the Jews. And so you look at those things and you go like, why isn't Israel saying we recognize the Armenian genocide? And why isn't Ukraine saying exactly the same thing about what's happening here? And because the answer is they're making their decisions based on political expediency.
Realpolitik.
Let's.
And you're calling you feel like you're calling for Israel to be a military, political, a moral leader in the world, to actually take leadership. And I think the whole world is terrified of the global jihad.
Let's stand up and say this is right, this is wrong. That doesn't really align with our political goals, but it's still wrong. Armenia, they have nothing to offer us politically, but it's still wrong what's being done to them. That's not hard to do. A leader who's concerned with morality first could be able to do those things and say, like I say, in the whether it's Zelensky or whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Netanyahu, to say, this is right, this is wrong. Even if it doesn't align with us politically, we can still recognize right and wrong, and we can stand up for what's right.
Jeremy, I think you got some Torah to finish us out on that concept.
Well, it's exactly that. Morality, right and wrong and truth.
Yep.
The book of Exodus in Hebrew is actually called the book of names. And it ends with the construction of the tabernacle. And why is it called the book of names? Because it's like, this is when Israel gets its name. Not a name of an individual like Noah or Adam or Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but Israel as a nation becomes a nation in the book of Exodus, and we receive our name, our essence. And how does it end? It ends at making a dwelling place for God in the world. Ends with making a tabernacle. That's how the book ends. Where the tabernacle could have put in the book of Leviticus, it specifically ends in the book of names because that is our name. And what is our mission here? It's exactly like what you said, to be a voice of morality, to be a voice of clarity, of truth, to make a dwelling place for God in the land of Israel. That's our mission. And in order to do that, we have to remove the evil from the land, either with the new MK-84 bombs or with immigration, but it is to remove the evil from the land, because that's the only way we can make a dwelling place for the truth.
I love that.
That's the only place we can make a dwelling place for God in the world.
Can I just piggyback, because Jeremy is not only my commander in the army, he's my Rebbe, and I'm just going to take that one step further, because the Ramban, Nachmanides, he calls the book of Exodus, he calls it Sefer HaGeulah, the book of redemption.
Wow. Yeah.
It's 42 chapters, but only the first 12 actually talks about the redemption from Egypt.
Yeah.
So why is it called the book of redemption if it's over 40 chapters? And the answer is because redemption isn't just freedom from a slavery. It is fulfillment of your mission in the world. And our mission is exactly what Jeremy just said, to bring God's presence into. And if we're going to be able to build the temple, we have to be able to build it in our hearts. And the one word, one letter difference between the word for Geulah, which is redemption, and Golah, which is exile. And that's the letter Aleph, which stands for Alufo Shel Olam, for God. When we bring God into our hearts, and then we don't put our faith in Trump, and we don't put our fears in Russia, but our fear is of God and our faith is in God, that is what will bring the redemption, make our hearts into the temple, and then the temple will be built on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem.
Amen. We got it. All right, guys, this has been an awesome show. Go! Right. I mean, right with the new chief of staff. That is literally my high point of this week. The high point, chief of staff, may it be just as he said.
Is that the thing? Do they go take your prayers out of there and people read them?
You're like, I'm watching what I'm putting in there now.
It happens for everyone. For Obama, I remember.
They took it out after.
Somebody steals it.
Oh, that's a hoot.
Like
okay, guys,
somebody's diary.
We've run flat out of time. You're right. But hopefully God heard the prayers well, and we'll see that to happen soon. Ari, awesome show. Jeremy, Chuck, awesome to have you on. Don't forget to check out the Land of Israel Network. Go ahead and check out the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton as well. And as always, guys, tune out that fake news and propaganda and tune into what's actually happening here in the Land of Israel. And also, don't forget to watch that new film next week. It's coming out, the Judea and Samaria film. Incredible film our team has just produced. Be ready for that next week. And don't forget about the Israel Summit, June 9th through the 11th in Dallas. We'll see you there, and we'll be back here next week.